Have you ever wondered what secrets lie within the reflections we see every day? The stories whispered in lamplight about mirrors being gateways to other worlds. I never believed them until I found that mirror. My grandmother's Victorian manor stood like a sentinel of forgotten memories, its weathered facade holding decades of family history within its walls. I'd been putting off clearing out her estate since the funeral, but that day, that cursed day, something drew me there. The attic air hung thick with dust, dancing in the pale streams of light that filtered through cobwebbed windows. Each step across the creaking floorboards stirred up clouds of memories. That's when I saw it. Draped in yellowed lace, its presence commanding attention even beneath its shroud. The mirror was unlike anything I'd ever seen. A masterpiece of 16th century Venetian craftsmanship, its bronze frame writhed with faces caught in eternal agony. As an art curator, I should have been thinking about its value, its historical significance. Instead, I couldn't shake the feeling that those metallic faces were watching me. My fingers traced the intricate symbols carved into its frame, symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. Each face told a different story of torment, their screams forever frozen in bronze. But it was the letter I found tucked behind the frame that made my blood run cold. My grandmother's familiar handwriting, usually so steady and precise, was shaky and urgent. My dearest Isabella, if you're reading this, I've failed. Whatever you do, never look into this mirror after midnight. Some reflections show us things we were never meant to see. Some truths are better left unknown. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this inheritance. I should have heeded her warning, should have covered that mirror and left it to gather dust. But curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. As I stood there, watching my reflection in that ancient glass, something shifted in those depths. For just a moment, so brief I could have convinced myself I imagined it, my reflection smiled back at me when I wasn't smiling. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I stepped onto a path that would show me not just reflections of myself, but visions of my own mortality. They say knowledge is power, but some knowledge comes with a price. And the price of knowing the day you'll die, that's a burden that changes you forever. I didn't know then that every woman in my family who had owned this mirror had seen the same thing. Their own death, played out in perfect detail. My grandmother had seen hers, her mother before her. And now, as I stood there in that dusty attic, the mirror had chosen its next witness. Some say we're all just reflections of our past, echoes of those who came before us. But as I would soon learn, sometimes reflections have a will of their own. And this mirror? It didn't just show the future, it hungered for it. They say time is like a river flowing inevitably toward its destination. But what if you could see where that river ends? Would you try to change its course? Or would you learn that some destinies, like some reflections, are impossible to escape? This is my story, a story of fate, family, and the terrifying truth that sometimes the most frightening things aren't what we see in the mirror, but what the mirror sees in us. Remember my grandmother's warning. Never look into an ancient mirror after midnight, because sometimes what looks back at you isn't just your reflection. Sometimes it's your future, and sometimes that future has plans of its own. As an art curator, I've authenticated countless pieces of history. Each antique tells a story, but this mirror, it knew my story better than I did. At first, I approached it clinically, measuring its dimensions, photographing the intricate bronze work, documenting every detail for potential buyers. That's when I first saw her, a flash of silver hair in the reflection. Gone so quickly, I questioned my own eyes. But she returned, this ethereal figure mimicking my every move with an unsettling delay, like an echoing glass, always a heartbeat behind. I told myself it was just a trick of light, a product of too many sleepless nights spent researching the mirror's origins. But then the mirror started showing me things buried so deep in my past that I'd almost convinced myself they weren't real. I saw myself at 6 years old, the day I nearly drowned at Lake Geneva. No one knew about that day. I'd never told a soul how I'd wandered too far from the shore, how the cold water had filled my lungs. Yet there it was, playing out in perfect detail across the mirror's surface. Marcus noticed something was wrong when he came to help with the authentication. He's been my best friend since college, the most grounded person I know. But even he couldn't explain what he saw. My reflection blinking when my eyes were open, subtle movements that didn't match my own. "Bella?" he said, his voice shaking. "I don't think this is just an antique." The truth emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. Every document we uncovered, every historical record we traced, led us back to one name, Madame Ravenna. She wasn't just any 16th century oracle. She was feared throughout Venice for the chilling accuracy of her predictions. The wealthy and powerful would seek her counsel, but every fortune she told came with a price. They say she could see death itself reflected in her mirror. One by one, Venice's most prominent families received their death dates, each prophecy fulfilled with terrifying precision. But Madame Ravenna's final prediction remained a mystery. On the night she disappeared, she left only a cryptic message etched into her mirror. "What shows death must feed on death." I know how this sounds, like a ghost story, a dark fairy tale. But fairy tales don't show you your own memories. They don't know your deepest secrets. And they certainly don't make your reflection move on its own. The more I researched, the more the mirror seemed to respond. Each night, the silver-haired woman grew clearer, her features more defined. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with what seemed like pity. Other times there was something darker in her gaze, something hungry. Marcus begged me to sell the mirror, to be rid of it before things got worse. But how do you sell something that might be alive? Something that knows your darkest moments, your deepest fears? Besides, every time I considered it, I'd catch another glimpse of her. Madame Ravenna. I was sure of it now. And the look in her eyes told me our story wasn't finished. They say knowledge is power. But as I delved deeper into the mirror's history, I began to understand why some truths remain buried. Why some mysteries are better left unsolved. Because with each revelation, with each secret the mirror showed me, I felt myself being drawn deeper into its web. The mirror wasn't just showing me my past. It was preparing me for something. Something that made Madame Ravenna vanish without a trace. Something that had been waiting centuries for the right person to look into its depths. And as I stood there, watching my reflection move just a fraction of a second too late, I realised I wasn't researching the mirror anymore. The mirror was studying me. They say the darkest hour is just before dawn, but for me, it was exactly 3:33 a.m. when true darkness crept in. I jolted awake that night, drawn to the mirror by an invisible force. What I saw, or rather what I didn't see, changed everything. My reflection was gone, leaving nothing but an empty room staring back at me. When my image finally returned, something was different. The mirror didn't just show me, it showed versions of me. Future moments played out like scenes from a movie I hadn't filmed yet. I saw myself giving a presentation at work, wearing a blue blazer I didn't own. 3 days later, I found myself living that exact moment, every detail precisely as the mirror had shown. These visions started small, insignificant moments that could be dismissed as coincidence, but they grew darker, more elaborate. I saw myself aged, grey-streaked hair and wrinkled hands. Then young again, but in situations that made my blood run cold. Each scene more disturbing than the last, each one manifesting in reality with terrifying precision. One frost-covered morning, I approached the mirror to find something etched across its surface. A date, crystallized in ice despite the warmth of my room, December 31st, 2024. The same day, I'd heard my grandmother whisper in her final, delirious moments. I felt the weight of that date settle into my bones, a countdown I never asked for. That's when I found it, hidden behind a loose panel in grandmother's study, her diary. Page after page filled with her increasingly frantic handwriting. The truth spilled out in ink and tears. Every woman in our family line who had possessed the mirror had seen their death date reflected in its surface. My great-grandmother, my grandmother. Each prediction fulfilled with merciless accuracy. But the diary revealed something even more terrifying. The mirror wasn't just a window to the future. It was an architect of fate. It didn't simply show death, it crafted it. Like a spider weaving an intricate web, the mirror manipulated events, people, circumstances, ensuring its dark prophecies would come true. My grandmother described watching her own fate unfold, how every attempt to prevent it only served to weave her tighter into the mirror's design. Each choice she made to avoid her predicted death became another thread in the tapestry of her destiny. The entries grew more desperate as her date approached. She wrote about the mirror's true nature, how it fed on the fear and desperation of those who tried to outrun their reflections, how it drew power from their futile struggles against fate. I remember her last words now with chilling clarity. "The mirror doesn't show you how you die, Isabella. It shows you how it will kill you." Time became fluid, unreliable. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the mirror, sometimes older, sometimes younger, but always with that same look of haunted recognition. The mirror was showing me every possible version of my fate, like a kaleidoscope of doom, each reflection a different path to the same inevitable end. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear whispers coming from its surface, the voices of all the women who came before me, trying to warn me, or perhaps trying to apologize for passing down this curse. Their faces appear in the bronze frame now, joining the chorus of tortured souls frozen in metal. The mirror has become more than just a family heirloom. It's a chronicle of our deaths, a testament to the price of knowing one's fate. And as December 31st draws closer, I'm beginning to understand why my grandmother's final warning wasn't about looking into the mirror after midnight. It was about looking into it at all. Because once the mirror shows you your death, it's not just a possibility anymore, it's a promise. And this mirror never breaks its promises. When you're running out of options, you'll seek answers anywhere. That's how I found myself in Dr. Eleanor Thorne's study, surrounded by ancient texts and artifacts that would make my curator's heart race under normal circumstances. But there was nothing normal about my situation. The moment I mentioned the mirror, her face went pale. "A speculum mortis," she whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for a leather-bound book. The Romans called them death mirrors. They're not just portals, they're prisons for souls. She explained how each reflection I witnessed wasn't just a vision. It was the mirror feeding on my essence, consuming small fragments of my life force. Every glimpse of the future came at a price, paid in pieces of my own soul. I thought about how tired I'd been feeling, how drained. It wasn't stress or lack of sleep. The mirror was literally killing me, one reflection at a time. Others have tried destroying them, Dr. Thorne warned, showing me centuries-old accounts. Each attempt only accelerated their fate. One woman took a hammer to her mirror. She was dead within an hour, exactly as it had shown her. Another tried burning hers. The smoke formed into the same shapes she'd seen in her reflection, suffocating her. The mirror seemed to know we were discussing it. That night, it showed me death after death, each scenario more horrifying than the last. I saw myself drowning, burning, falling, each death unique, yet all ending at exactly the same moment, midnight on December 31st. Then she appeared, my grandmother's reflection, but not as I remembered her in her final days. She looked younger, vibrant, yet her eyes carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "I tried, Isabella," she said, her voice echoing as if from the bottom of a well. "I thought I could break the curse. I was wrong. The mirror doesn't just show death, it craves it, it needs it." Meanwhile, Marcus had been conducting his own research. His findings chilled me to the bone. Similar mirrors had surfaced throughout history, across every continent. A businessman in Tokyo found perfectly preserved in his office, his reflection still moving in his mirror. A teenager in Buenos Aires, whose diary described seeing her own death weeks before she vanished. A family in Moscow, all found lifeless before their antique mirror, their reflections smiling back at anyone who dared look. "They're all connected," Marcus explained, spreading photographs across my desk. Each mirror shows the same pattern of symbols, just arranged differently, like they're all pieces of a larger whole. Dr. Thorne's words haunted me. The mirrors aren't just showing the future, they're harvesting souls for something. Each death feeds their power, building towards some greater purpose we don't understand. I felt it now, the mirror's hunger. Every time I passed it, the pull was stronger. The reflections more frequent, more vivid. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of the other victims within its surface, their faces pressing against the glass like prisoners begging for release. My grandmother's spirit appeared more frequently, her warnings becoming more urgent. Each soul it takes makes it stronger, she told me. Each death brings it closer to whatever it's trying to achieve. You're not just fighting for your life, Isabella. You're fighting against something that's been planning this for centuries. The truth became clear. This wasn't just about me or my family. We were all part of something larger, something ancient and patient. The mirrors weren't just predicting death. They were collecting souls like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. And as I stood there, watching my reflection fragment into 1,000 possible deaths, I realized I wasn't just trying to save myself anymore. I was trying to stop whatever these mirrors were building toward. Whatever dark purpose required so many souls, so many carefully orchestrated deaths. Because sometimes the deadliest traps aren't the ones that kill you, they're the ones that make you part of something far worse than death. Understanding struck me like lightning on a clear day. The mirror wasn't just showing me death. It was feasting on my terror, growing stronger with every racing heartbeat, every sleepless night, every moment of dread as December 31st drew closer. My fear wasn't just a reaction to its power, it was the source of its power. Hidden in the depths of Dr. Thorne's archives, I found Madame Ravenna's last recorded words scrawled in fading ink. The mirror's power breaks when faced with unshakable truth. For centuries, scholars had debated their meaning. Some thought she'd gone mad in her final moments, but as I traced the words with trembling fingers, their meaning crystallized with terrible clarity. That's when I first noticed the marks. They appeared like frost on skin. Intricate symbols matching those on the mirror's frame, spreading across my arms, my shoulders, my back. At first they were barely visible, like silver threads beneath my skin, but they grew darker, more defined, as if the mirror was slowly claiming me, marking me as its own. Time itself seemed to bend around the mirror now. I'd stand before it for what felt like minutes, only to find hours had passed in the world outside. Other times, mere seconds in the mirror's reflection contained eternities. The boundary between reality and reflection blurred until I wasn't sure which side of the glass was truly mine. One night, as I watched my reflection fracture into countless possible deaths, something changed. Through the kaleidoscope of mortality, I saw something else. Something beneath the surface of each death scene. I wasn't witnessing my end. I was watching my metamorphosis. In each reflection, the symbols on my skin glowed with increasing intensity. My eyes held an otherworldly light. The silver-haired woman I'd first seen in the mirror wasn't a ghost or a previous victim. She was me, or rather what the mirror intended me to become. The truth unfurled like a dark flower in my mind. The mirror hadn't chosen me by chance. My grandmother hadn't simply passed down a curse. This was a selection process spanning centuries, refining bloodlines, preparing vessels for something greater and more terrible than mere death. Each woman in my family line who had faced the mirror wasn't just a victim, they were candidates. And now, as the symbols burned beneath my skin and time warped around me, I understood why the mirror had shown me so many deaths. It wasn't testing my mortality, it was testing my worthiness. Madame Ravenna's final prophecy wasn't a warning, it was a key. The unshakable truth wasn't about accepting death, it was about accepting transformation. The mirror didn't want to kill me, it wanted to remake me. As December 31st loomed closer, the line between flesh and reflection grew thinner. The symbols on my skin pulsed in rhythm with the twisted faces in the mirror's frame. In every reflection I caught glimpses of what I was becoming, something both more and less than human. The mirror wasn't just a window or a portal, it was a crucible turning fear into power, death into rebirth. And as I stood before it, watching my reflection smile with ancient knowledge, I realized I had to make a choice. I could run from this transformation, fight against it until the mirror claimed me, like all the others. Or I could face the unshakable truth. Sometimes, what we perceive as our end is merely a doorway to something else. Something that has been waiting centuries for the right person to step through. The real question wasn't whether I would die on December 31st. The question was, what would I become? December 31st arrived with an unnatural stillness. As midnight approached, the mirror's surface rippled like dark water, showing me 1,000 possible endings to my story. In one reflection, I saw myself consumed by shadows, in another, transformed into light. Each reality was distinct, yet somehow all of them felt true. The symbols on my skin burned with cold fire, resonating with the ancient markings on the mirror's frame. As I stood before it one final time, I saw past the veil of fear that had clouded my vision for so long. The mirror wasn't deciding my fate. It was reflecting my own terror back at me, magnifying it, feeding on it, using it to weave the very chains that bound me to its power. That's when I saw her clearly for the first time. Madame Ravenna, not as the powerful oracle history remembered, but as she truly was. A young woman much like me, standing before this mirror centuries ago. I watched her discovery echo through time. She hadn't created this mirror. She had been its first chosen victim, its first transformation. Her prophecies weren't predictions. They were warnings, desperate attempts to prepare others for what was coming. The mirror's surface fractured into countless facets, each one showing a different version of my fate. But now I understood. These weren't possible futures. They were tests, each one designed to reveal something about myself. The mirror wasn't showing me how I would die. It was showing me who I truly was. Time seemed to hold its breath as midnight approached. The room filled with whispers, the voices of all those who had stood where I stood, their reflections trapped within the glass. But among them, growing clearer, was Madame Ravenna's voice. The mirror shows us what we fear most about ourselves. That is its true power. That is its true purpose. In that moment, standing before my 1,000 reflections, I finally understood the darkest truth, the one truth I had been running from my entire life. The mirror hadn't chosen me because it wanted to end my life. It had chosen me because it saw something in me that I had refused to see in myself. Every death it had shown me was a different facet of my own nature. Every transformation it predicted was a version of a truth I had denied. The mirror wasn't a weapon or a curse. It was a revelation. And the true test wasn't surviving until midnight. The test was having the courage to look into those infinite reflections and recognize myself in every one. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the mirror's surface began to pulse with an otherworldly light. The symbols on my skin flared in response, and I felt the weight of centuries pressing in around me. In each reflection, I saw myself make a different choice, take a different path. But all paths led to this moment, this final confrontation, not with the mirror, but with myself. The faces in the bronze frame watched in eternal silence as I reached out toward the glass. The surface rippled like quicksilver beneath my touch, and in that moment, I saw what Madame Ravenna had seen all those years ago. The truth wasn't about death or survival. It was about acceptance, about understanding that sometimes the most terrifying reflection isn't the one that shows us our death. It's the one that shows us who we really are. As midnight struck, I made my choice. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of understanding. Because in the end, the mirror's greatest power wasn't its ability to show death or predict fate. Its power lay in forcing us to confront the truths we hide from ourselves. And as the final chime echoed through the darkness, I realized, some reflections don't show us our end, they show us our beginning. As the clock strikes midnight, Bella finally faces the mirror, not with dread, but with newfound clarity. Her reflection stares back at her, no longer fractured or distorted, but whole, radiating a quiet strength. She understands now. Accepting the inevitability of death strips the mirror of its power. The mirror begins to crack, the fractures glowing with an ethereal light. With each splintering sound, the voices of trapped souls echo through the room, their anguish giving way to gratitude. The souls, including those of Bella's ancestors, swirl out in a cascade of light, filling the space with warmth and freedom. Bella collapses to her knees, overwhelmed as the oppressive weight of the mirror lifts. But as the shards fall to the ground, Bella sees a glimmer of something more. Among the fragments lies a small, untouched piece of glass, its surface rippling with faint images. In it, Bella catches a reflection, not of herself, but of Madame Ravenna. The realization strikes like a lightning bolt. Bella isn't just a descendant of the mirror's victims. She is the key to their liberation because she is a reincarnation of Madame Ravenna herself. The mirror's relentless pull had always been a connection to its creator, a karmic cycle demanding resolution. In that moment, Bella understands the ultimate truth about fate and free will. The mirror never dictated destiny, it revealed the truths people feared, forcing them to confront their choices. Free will had always existed, hidden beneath layers of fear and denial. Bella rises, staring at the last shard of the mirror. Though the souls are free, the shard pulses faintly, as if alive. She knows the mirror's essence is not truly gone. Its curse has transformed, waiting for another opportunity to prey on human vulnerability. As Bella walks away, she vows to break the cycle permanently. She carries the shard, its power contained but not destroyed. The final scene shows her reflection in a quiet moment, her expression calm but resolute. Yet in the faintest glimmer of the shard, a new ripple appears, subtle but undeniable. The mirror's curse isn't dead, it has evolved, adapting to a new era, waiting for the next chapter of its dark legacy to unfold. The story concludes with a chilling reminder. Some cycles end, but others merely change shape, forever entwined with the human need to seek the truth, no matter the cost.